January 18, 1945. Winston Churchill stood before the House of Commons, holding a statement that would rewrite everything Britain had said about American military capability. For years, Churchill had positioned Britain as the senior military partner, the experienced professionals guiding enthusiastic but inexperienced Americans. Now he was about to acknowledge what George S. Patton's relief of Bastogne had proven beyond any doubt. The balance of military power had shifted forever. "This is undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war," Churchill began, his voice carrying across the chamber, "and will, I believe, be regarded as an ever-famous American victory." Those words cost Churchill more than most historians realize. They represented the end of British military primacy in the Western Alliance. They acknowledged that an American general had accomplished something no British commander could match. And they came after Churchill witnessed the most audacious military maneuver of the entire war. One that changed his view of American capability, of George Patton, and of Britain's place in the post-war world. This is the story of what Churchill said, what he thought, and what Patton's impossible achievement meant for Anglo-American relations. A story of 250,000 troops pivoting 90 degrees in a blizzard, of desperate men holding against impossible odds, and of the moment Churchill realized the Americans no longer needed British guidance. They were writing their own legends now. December 16, 1944. Churchill received the first reports of the German offensive in the Ardennes with grave concern. Hitler had launched Operation Watch on the Rhine, with over 200,000 men, nearly 1,000 tanks, and complete surprise. The German attack had smashed through American lines along a 75-mile front, creating a massive bulge in Allied defenses and threatening to split the entire Allied force in two. Churchill immediately grasped the strategic implications. If the Germans reached the Meuse River and captured Antwerp, they could separate British forces from American forces, potentially forcing separate peace negotiations. The offensive threatened everything the Allies had achieved since D-Day. But Churchill's concern went beyond military strategy. The Battle of the Bulge was testing American resolve and capability under the worst possible conditions. The American sector had taken the main blow. American troops were bearing the brunt of Hitler's last gamble. How they responded would define the transatlantic alliance for decades to come. Churchill placed an immediate call to Eisenhower at Supreme Headquarters. According to witnesses, Churchill's first question was characteristically direct. "What do you need from British forces?" Eisenhower outlined the situation. The critical town of Bastogne, where 7 main roads converged, was surrounded. Over 11,000 American soldiers, primarily the 101st Airborne Division, were trapped. German forces outnumbered them 3-1. Weather had grounded Allied aircraft, preventing resupply or close air support. The surrounded Americans had perhaps 4 to 5 days before ammunition ran out completely. "If Bastogne falls," Eisenhower told Churchill, "the Germans have a clear path to the Meuse. We need to relieve those paratroopers." "What forces are available?" Churchill asked. "Patton's Third Army. They're 100 miles south, currently engaged in the Saar." There was a pause. Churchill knew Patton's reputation. Aggressive, theatrical, controversial. The general who'd beaten Montgomery to Messina in Sicily, turning that campaign into a personal race. The General Churchill had found simultaneously impressive and irritating. "Can Patton reach Bastogne in time?" Churchill asked. "He says he can attack north in 48 hours with 3 divisions. Churchill's reaction, recorded by his military secretary, was skeptical. 48 hours? To disengage from active combat, rotate 90 degrees, move 100 miles through winter conditions, and launch a coordinated attack? That's operationally impossible. Patton's already preparing," Eisenhower replied. He anticipated this before we called the meeting. After hanging up, Churchill turned to his chief of the Imperial General Staff, Field Marshal Alan Brooke. "Patton's making promises again. grand promises about impossible maneuvers. If he fails, if those American paratroopers are lost, it will be a catastrophe for the alliance. Brooke agreed. Patton's operationally brilliant, but this exceeds anything attempted in modern warfare. Even if his men move at maximum speed, the Germans will fight every mile. The weather's appalling. The terrain's difficult. 3 divisions in 48 hours? I don't see how it's possible. Churchill walked to his map room, studying the Ardennes situation. The Bulge was expanding. German armor was pushing west. Bastogne was completely encircled. The situation looked grim. If Patton actually pulls this off, Churchill said quietly, it will be the most remarkable operational achievement of the war. If he fails, he didn't finish the sentence. The implications were obvious. December 19th. Churchill received updates from the Verdun Conference, where Eisenhower had met with his commanders. Patton had indeed promised to attack on December 22nd. Multiple witnesses confirmed that other American generals thought Patton was exaggerating. But Eisenhower had given Patton a mission anyway. Churchill's diary entry that evening was revealing. Eisenhower has gambled everything on Patton. If the Americans lose the 101st Airborne at Bastogne, if Patton cannot deliver on his promise, the psychological impact could be devastating. But if Patton succeeds, if he actually pivots an entire army and breaks through German lines in 4 days, it will demonstrate American operational capability beyond anything we British have achieved. That assessment was significant. Churchill was acknowledging, at least privately, that American forces might be capable of something British forces could not match. Over the next week, Churchill monitored Third Army's movement with obsessive attention. His military staff provided constant updates. The reports were almost unbelievable. December 20th. Third Army was disengaging from combat in the Saar, a complex maneuver that normally took weeks. Patton's forces were doing it in hours. 3 full divisions, the 4th Armored, 26th Infantry, and 80th Infantry, over 250,000 troops total, were pulling out of active combat, rotating north, and beginning the march toward Bastogne. Churchill received detailed intelligence reports on the logistics involved. The scale of the operation was staggering. Moving 250,000 men required coordinating 133,000 vehicles. Supply lines had to be completely reoriented. Artillery positions had to be relocated. Combat engineers had to clear and maintain roads through winter conditions. This is extraordinary, Churchill told Brooke. Even if Patton fails to reach Bastogne in time, the operational coordination alone is impressive. He's moving an entire army like it's a single division. December 21st, Patton's forces were making remarkable progress. The 4th Armored Division was already approaching Bastogne from the south, fighting through German defensive positions. The weather was brutally cold, with heavy snow and ice making every mile a battle. Churchill received reports that Bastogne's situation was deteriorating rapidly. The 101st Airborne was nearly out of ammunition. Medical supplies were exhausted. Wounded soldiers were dying in freezing cellars. German attacks were intensifying. The surrounded Americans had perhaps 48 hours left. It's going to be close, Churchill told his war cabinet. Desperately close. December 22nd. The date Patton had promised. Churchill waited for news of the attack. The reports came in stages. Patton's forces had indeed launched their offensive north, exactly as promised. The 4th Armored Division, led by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, was spearheading the attack. But progress was slower than needed. German resistance was fierce. Every village, every hedgerow, every crossroads was contested. The Germans knew what losing Bastogne would mean. They were fighting with desperate determination. Churchill received a message from Eisenhower. Patton has attacked as promised, but he may not reach Bastogne in time. The 101st is at the breaking point. That evening, Churchill composed a message to Roosevelt. In it, he acknowledged the courage of American forces at Bastogne and praised Patton's aggressive response. But privately, Churchill doubted Patton would succeed. The maneuver was too ambitious, the timeline too compressed, the resistance too strong. December 23rd. The weather finally cleared enough for Allied air support. Churchill watched reports of C-47 transports dropping supplies to Bastogne. Fighter bombers were pounding German positions around the besieged town. It bought time, but not much. Patton's forces were still fighting toward Bastogne, still taking casualties, still pushing forward. The 4th Armored had advanced to within miles of the town, but German counterattacks were slowing them down. Churchill sent a message to Eisenhower. The defense of Bastogne is proving to be one of the great stands of this war. Whatever the outcome, those American paratroopers have earned immortal honor. December 24th. Christmas Eve. Churchill spent the evening monitoring reports from the Ardennes. Bastogne was still holding, but barely. German forces were preparing a major assault to finally crush the defenders. Patton's relief force was tantalizingly close, but still separated from Bastogne by German defensive lines. Churchill's military secretary recorded that the Prime Minister was unusually quiet that evening. He stood by the map, studying the situation, occasionally smoking his cigar but saying little. Finally, Churchill spoke. "If Patton reaches them tomorrow, on Christmas Day, it will be the finest Christmas present those paratroopers ever received. If he doesn't, if they fall on Christmas, it will be a tragedy that haunts this alliance forever." December 25th, Christmas Day. Still no breakthrough. Patton's forces were fighting desperately to reach Bastogne. The 4th Armored Division was grinding forward, taking heavy casualties, but making progress. Inside Bastogne, the 101st Airborne continued holding, though their situation was critical. Churchill attended Christmas services, but couldn't focus. Every few hours, he checked for updates. Nothing definitive. Just reports of continued fighting, of Americans struggling forward through snow and German fire. December 26th, 4:50 p.m. The message Churchill had been waiting for arrived at 10 Downing Street. His military secretary rushed into Churchill's study. "Sir, Bastogne is relieved. Patton's 4th Armored broke through. They've made contact with the 101st. Churchill stood slowly, absorbing the news. "Confirmed?" "Yes, sir." Captain William Dwight's company from the 37th Tank Battalion made first contact at 1650 hours. "The corridor is narrow, but it's open. Patton's forces are pushing supplies and reinforcements through now." Churchill sat back down heavily. His reaction, recorded by multiple witnesses, was complex. Relief, certainly. The 101st Airborne was saved. But also something else. Recognition. Acknowledgement. The realization that Patton had accomplished exactly what he promised, against odds everyone thought impossible. "Get me Field Marshal Montgomery," Churchill ordered. The call connected. Montgomery's voice was strained. He'd been coordinating British forces on the northern shoulder of the German Bulge, containing the offensive but unable to counterattack effectively. "You've heard about Bastogne?" Churchill asked. "Yes, Prime Minister." Patton broke through, and exactly the time frame he promised. 4 days from start to relief. Moving 250,000 troops through winter conditions while maintaining offensive operations. Have we ever achieved anything comparable, Monty? There was a pause. "No, Prime Minister. We haven't. This changes things," Churchill said quietly. "The Americans have proven they can execute operational maneuvers that exceed our own capabilities. We can no longer treat them as junior partners learning from British experience." After hanging up with Montgomery, Churchill called Eisenhower. His congratulations were genuine and extensive. "Ike, what Patton has accomplished is extraordinary. Moving an entire army 90 degrees, breaking through German lines, relieving a surrounded force, all in 4 days. It's the kind of operational brilliance we read about in military histories, not something we expect to see in real time." Eisenhower, according to his diary, was gratified by Churchill's praise. George delivered when it mattered most. I'll never doubt him again. Nor should you, Churchill replied. Nor should any of us. The following days brought Churchill face to face with difficult truths. The Battle of the Bulge had become an American battle, fought primarily by American forces, with American generals achieving the decisive victories. British forces under Montgomery were performing well on the northern shoulder, containing German advances and preparing for their own counteroffensive. But Montgomery's attack wouldn't begin until January 3rd, days after Patton had already achieved his breakthrough. The contrast was stark. Churchill's diary entries from late December reveal his evolving assessment. He wrote on December 28th, Patton's relief of Bastogne represents a watershed moment in Anglo-American military relations. For years, we British have positioned ourselves as the experienced professionals, the steady hands guiding American enthusiasm. Sicily reinforced that narrative, with Montgomery's methodical advance contrasting with Patton's dash to Messina. But Bastogne cannot be explained away or minimized. Patton executed the most complex operational maneuver of the war with speed and precision that exceeded anything British forces have achieved. He moved 250,000 troops like they were a single battalion. He anticipated the German offensive before our own intelligence did. He delivered exactly what he promised exactly when he promised it. This is not beginner's luck or American recklessness. This is operational genius of the highest order. And we British must acknowledge it. Churchill's public statements began to reflect this reassessment. On December 29th, he sent a message to Eisenhower for distribution to American forces. The defense of Bastogne by American airborne forces and their relief by General Patton's Third Army stands among the finest achievements of this war. The courage, determination, and operational excellence displayed by American forces during this desperate battle has earned the admiration of all Allied nations. To Roosevelt, Churchill was more candid. In a personal letter dated December 30th, he wrote, "The American performance at Bastogne and throughout the Battle of the Bulge has been magnificent. General Patton's operational capabilities, which I must confess I previously underestimated, have proven to be exceptional. His ability to move vast forces with such speed and coordinate such complex attacks under terrible conditions demonstrates that American military leadership has matured beyond our expectations. This creates both opportunity and challenge for Britain. The opportunity lies in having such capable allies who can share the burden of defeating Germany. The challenge lies in maintaining British influence and relevance when American military capability now equals or exceeds our own." January 18th, 1945. Churchill's speech to the House of Commons was the culmination of weeks of reflection on what Bastogne meant for Britain, for America, and for the Alliance. He stood before Parliament, knowing that many MPs still clung to notions of British military superiority. His words needed to acknowledge reality while preserving British dignity. "The Battle of the Bulge," Churchill began, his voice carrying his trademark gravitas, "has been a great trial of strength between the Allied and German forces. It has resulted in a costly but decisive defeat of the enemy's plans." He paused, then delivered the words that would define his assessment of American military capability. "This is undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war and will, I believe, be regarded as an ever-famous American victory." The chamber was silent. Churchill had just acknowledged American military primacy in unmistakable terms. He continued, "The devotion of the American soldiers and their officers is beyond all praise. The way they have fought, the losses they have suffered, and the tenacity they have shown should be a source of pride to their nation and inspiration to us all. Special mention must be made of the relief of Bastogne, where American airborne forces held out under siege until General Patton's Third Army broke through German lines. This operation, executed with remarkable speed and operational excellence, stands as a testament to American military capability." Churchill's private secretary, later recorded that the Prime Minister had labored over every word of that speech, ensuring it gave Americans full credit while maintaining British dignity. He had rejected earlier drafts that minimized American achievement or overemphasized British contributions. After the speech, Churchill met privately with his war cabinet. His assessment was blunt. "Gentlemen, we must face facts. The Americans have proven they can execute operations that exceed our own capabilities." Patton moved 250,000 troops 90 degrees in a blizzard and broke through German lines in 4 days. Montgomery, for all his talents, has never achieved anything comparable. This doesn't diminish British achievements. We've been fighting since 1939. We've survived when others fell. But we can no longer pretend to be the senior military partner. The Americans have come of age. Our relationship must reflect that reality. Field Marshal Brooke, in his diary, recorded his own assessment. The PM is right, though it pains us to admit it. Bastogne demonstrated American operational maturity. We must adjust our approach accordingly. The Americans will no longer accept British direction. They've earned the right to equal partnership. In the weeks following his Commons speech, Churchill's correspondence reveals his complex feelings about Patton specifically and American military capability generally. To Montgomery, he wrote on January 25th, "Bastogne has proven that American generals, when properly motivated and supported, can achieve operational results that equal or exceed our own." Patton's performance was exceptional. We must study his methods and adapt our own approaches accordingly. The war is not yet won, and we need every advantage, including learning from American successes. To General Eisenhower, Churchill was effusive in his praise. General Patton's relief of Bastogne will be studied at military academies for generations. The speed, coordination, and aggressive execution demonstrated by Third Army represents the finest tradition of mobile warfare. I am grateful to have American forces of such quality fighting alongside British troops. But to Alan Brooke, Churchill expressed his deeper concern. The balance of military power has shifted irrevocably. American forces now outnumber British forces by significant margins. American industrial capacity exceeds ours. And now American operational capability has been demonstrated to equal ours. When this war ends, the Anglo-American relationship will be defined by American strength, not British experience. We must prepare for that reality. Churchill's final assessment of Patton came in his war memoirs, published years after the conflict. Writing with historical perspective, he was remarkably candid. General George S. Patton was among the most controversial commanders of the war. His theatrical style, his public indiscretions, and his aggressive personality made him difficult for allies to work with. But his relief of Bastogne demonstrated operational genius that could not be denied. The maneuver Patton executed disengaging from combat, pivoting 250,000 troops 90 degrees, maintaining offensive operations across 100 miles of winter terrain, and breaking through determined German resistance ranks among the finest operational achievements of World War II. It required exceptional staff work, aggressive leadership, and the ability to inspire exhausted troops to superhuman effort. Bastogne proved that American military leadership had matured beyond anyone's expectations. The students had become masters. And for Britain, this meant acknowledging that our American allies no longer needed our guidance. They were charting their own course to victory. Most revealing was Churchill's private letter to Eisenhower in 1951, years after both had left military service. Looking back on the war, I realized that Bastogne was the moment I understood the future of the Western Alliance. Not because it was the largest battle or the most strategic victory, but because it demonstrated American capability so dramatically that no one could deny it. Patton's achievement forced me to reassess everything I believed about Anglo-American military relations. I had spent years positioning Britain as the experienced senior partner. After Bastogne, that position was untenable. The Americans had proven they could accomplish operational feats that exceeded our own achievements. This was simultaneously humbling and reassuring. Humbling because it meant acknowledging that British military primacy was ending. Reassuring because it meant we had allies capable of bearing the immense burden of post-war security. If American operational capability in peacetime matched what Patton demonstrated at Bastogne, then the Western alliance would be in capable hands. The story of what Churchill said about Patton's relief of Bastogne is ultimately a story about the changing nature of the Anglo-American relationship. For years, Britain had been the dominant partner, the experienced professionals guiding enthusiastic American allies. Bastogne ended that dynamic forever. Patton's maneuver, moving 250,000 troops in 4 days, breaking through German lines, saving the 101st Airborne, proved that American forces could execute operations that rivaled or exceeded anything British forces had achieved. Churchill, pragmatist that he was, acknowledged this reality publicly and prepared Britain for a post-war world where American military capability would define Western security. His words, undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war, were more than diplomatic courtesy. They were recognition that the balance of power had shifted, that the Americans no longer needed British guidance, that the future of the Western alliance would be built on American strength rather than British experience. Patton's relief of Bastogne changed how Churchill viewed American military capability, how Britain positioned itself within the alliance, and how the transatlantic partnership would function for decades to come. One audacious maneuver, executed against impossible odds, rewrote the strategic relationship between two nations and defined the military balance of power for the post-war era.